Ahead and bring in Harvard professor Avi Loeb. We have waited to be able to talk to you about this three-eye atlas, and finally we get some images from NASA. So they say they are opening a window into other solar systems. What was your reaction to what we just saw and heard?
Well, there wasn't much news, I must say. An hour before that press conference, I was asked by a reporter, what do I expect? And I said that I don't expect big news. NASA will repeat the official mantra that 3I Atlas is a natural comet and that they were unable to process the data until now because of the government shutdown. And probably the high-rise image will show a fuzzy ball of light like the Hubble image. But I hoped to be surprised, and I was not.
Oh, man.
But we did see new data, but nothing major in terms of the insights as to the nature of the object. There was data presented in addition to the one we already saw from the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, SPHERE-X, SWIFT tests. I mean, these are things we already witnessed. There was some new data from the Lucy spacecraft, MAVEN, SOHO, HiRISE. But again, all these images were fuzzy. There was no new insight offered by them. And of course, one would like to analyze those images. I mean, they detected, for example, hydrogen from the spectrograph on MAVEN. So that, of course, says something about the production rate of water, because hydrogen comes from the breakup of water molecules. And one can also infer that from the detection of hydroxyl radicals, oxygen and hydrogen molecules that were detected actually a few weeks ago by a radio telescope, Meerkat. And it was detected again today. There was a report from early November. So, I mean, these are details that can be combined to infer production rate of water. We already know that carbon dioxide, based on Webb telescope data, was much more abundant than water. And so the main questions we have about 3I Atlas were not really addressed. And I would say that the data that was released over the past week or two after 3I Atlas came out of the direction of the sun, so we can observe it from Earth, that data is far more interesting. It shows jets, multiple jets going in different directions, and we're yet to see a big telescope imaging those jets. So far we saw amateur astronomers' telescopes. And so these images are intriguing. The question of whether 3I Atlas, for example, shows non-gravitational acceleration, that's still being calculated, debated. That's another important insight about what happened to it when it came closest to the sun. And of course, as it gets closest to Earth, that will be on December 19th, we'll have the best opportunity to use the hundreds of telescopes on Earth and the Hubble and Webb space telescopes to get our best data on it. So as far as I can tell, in terms of scientific output, there wasn't much offered in this press conference.
Plenty of questions for you. One question that was just posed. Can you respond to their conversation about, or their comments about it putting off nickel?
Well, so indeed, that's one of the anomalies. I listed 12 anomalies about 3I Atlas. One of them is that the detection of nickel was not supplemented by significant detection of iron. And in fact, the first detection of nickel had no iron, just an upper limit. Very extreme ratio of nickel to iron that was never seen before in any comet. And obviously that's puzzling, because nickel and iron are produced in exploding stars in similar amounts. And in fact, for the solar composition, there is more iron than nickel. So we've never seen something like that. And, when we, for example, find nickel from the impact of asteroids that are nickel rich, they are also iron rich. There is never a situation where it's mostly nickel and very little iron, except for industrial production of alloys, nickel alloys that are used for aerospace applications. So, I mean, they are always seeing whatever data we get as a signature of an unusual comet. Okay, so no matter how unusual the chemical composition would be, they would say, well, it came from a different environment. What do you expect? The main anomaly that I find extremely puzzling, and they didn't even mention it, is the size of the object. So, based on the data that we have by now, which is not just the Webb telescope data that they mentioned, but other details, it looks like the object is at least 5 kilometers in diameter and maybe more. And that means that it's at least 1,000 times more massive than the previous comet. We know it was a comet, Borisov, discovered in 2019. And moreover, it's about 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua, the first interstellar object. So when you see the third object being 1,000 times more massive than the second and 1 million times more massive than the first, it should raise a big question. How is that possible? Because we should have found 1,000 Borisovs and 1 million Oumuamuas before finding one giant icy iceberg of the type that we found. So this should be really a puzzle, and they should have mentioned it as a puzzle, but they don't even mention that. And the second is, why do we have it in the plane of the planets? I mean, obviously, it's a great fortune that all the NASA observatories can look at it, and they mentioned the fact that they look at it. They're really happy about the fact that they could monitor it all the time. But that fact that they can monitor it all the time is really a miracle, because only 1 in 500 incoming objects would be aligned so well with the ecliptic plane of the planets that allows all these NASA assets to be used. So they don't comment about that. So all the things that appear extremely rare, like all these features, maybe they say something that is not well understood. So NASA, these administrators basically are trying to portray an image of an unusual comet because it came from a different environment, but they don't attend to the fact that there are extremely rare properties of this comet that should puzzle them. So I think the appropriate response to that would be, there are very puzzling facts about this. Maybe it's a natural comet, but it means that we don't understand the factories that make such things. Because if we get such a big package that happens to be aligned with the plane of the planets and shows much more nickel than iron, maybe there is something really fundamentally wrong with the way we think about the origin of this thing. They don't even bring this up. I mean, I don't have an issue with them claiming it must be natural, but even if it's natural, it seems to me that the main message is that we are missing something. We don't know how such an object is generated or created.
If it's not, again, we've got a ton of questions for you on YouTube, and I know your time is tight today. Adam says, if they're billions of years old, like you said, wouldn't they have discovered a more efficient form of transportation rather than using a comet-like spacecraft? Wouldn't they have discovered faster than light travel, teleportation, wormhole dimensional travel, etc., after billions of years? That's why I'm skeptical on this whole object being of alien origin.
Well, this is a strange question, because whoever asked this question is skeptical because of ideas that have nothing to do with what we know about physics. We don't know if it's possible to travel faster than light. In fact, Einstein's theory of relativity says it's not. So the person who asks the question says, why couldn't they discover faster than light travel? Well, because as far as we know, it doesn't exist, okay? And the second is wormholes. As far as we know, it doesn't exist. We don't know how to make a wormhole. We don't know if it's possible to make a wormhole, because then you would build a time machine that would violate the laws of physics. So as far as we know, such things do not exist. So you can't ask a question saying they would have discovered it, because we don't know that such things exist. Okay. Now you can ask, why wasn't it moving faster than 10 to the minus 4 of the speed of light? In principle, That's a good question. But if they were to move faster, we would never discover an object moving close to the speed of light, because the telescopes would not record an object. They would basically get a smearing of the light from the object along a line, and it would be very dim. And the observers would dismiss it as an object. So an object moving too fast, much faster than the typical speed of asteroids, comets in our solar system, would be discarded. We will not hear about it. The observers will never report about it. So when you ask, why don't we see things moving faster? It's because of a selection effect. Our observations are not tuned to detect such objects.
Okay, so according to Rizzle, he says, according to the trajectory it entered our solar system, where did 3I Atlas come from?
We don't know where it came from, because that depends on the duration of the journey. And we have no clock on it to tell us how long the journey was. The only thing we have is that it moves at a high speed when it entered the solar system relative to the local population of stars. So the claim is, well, maybe it came from an old star, because old stars are kicked around and they reach higher speeds. But the problem with that proposition, and I wrote a paper related to that, is that there is a caveat, because you could imagine a parent star that is moving slowly, and then the ejection speed from that parent star was large. So we don't know if the ejection speed was large or the original host star was moving fast, and therefore we can't tell the age. There is no way for us to tell the age of the object unless we assume that the object acquired or inherited the original speed of its parent star, which is an assumption. We don't know if it's true or not, because we don't know what the ejection mechanism was and where did this object come from within the vicinity of that star.
Isaac asked, why do we have virtually no high-resolution images of the details in the surface of the moon and Mars? Don't we have the right people to clear that data?
Oh, we do have images of the surface of the moon and Mars, but when you say not enough resolution, that is dictated by the aperture of the cameras that were used. So there is the Mars orbiter that is actually gave us detailed images of Mars. There was a lunar orbiter that gave us detailed images of the moon, but we can do much better. And in the future, hopefully, there would be missions that would map those surfaces to much greater details. And moreover, as we go to these places, we could map it from up close.
Robert says, why do the jets and plumes that appear to be coming from 3I Atlas seem to not be influenced by a 16-hour rotation?
That's an excellent question. I asked the same. That's one of my anomalies. You would expect, given the typical speed of the material in those jets, you would expect to see wiggles that we don't see. And somehow the jets are tightly collimated. So this is an important puzzle that needs to be addressed. Again, we gain new knowledge in science out of asking questions or paying attention to anomalies. We don't learn much by saying, oh, it's a comet, comets do strange things, and therefore we shouldn't worry about it. That's not the way we learn something new.
Lots of people bringing up how long it took them to release this data. This one says, why would NASA have a big event to release a picture of a simple rock? And with almost 50 days without releasing anything, why should we believe them? They are known to alter their images all the time. Bring SMART back. That's what they said.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that they modify the images, but NASA is a big bureaucratic organization, and bureaucracy rules. So if there is a government shutdown, they may have given instructions not to release any data related to 3I Atlas because they want it to be processed through the headquarters. They didn't do the same about other data. For example, the HiRISE camera was taking images of Mars and releasing them, a day later. You can look at the HiRISE website and you will see images that were released during the shutdown, no problem at all. However, the image of 3i Atlas was waiting for 45 days before we got to see it, and it wasn't particularly revealing anything, insightful about the nature of the object. So I do think that it's just the NASA bureaucracy that set some rule about 3i Atlas. They wanted to have the data publicly available after, the administrators have a chance to review it. And I don't see anything beyond that. It's just the bureaucracy taking hostage the dissemination of scientific information. Of course, if it was an academic institution where there is no threat from shutdown, and even if there was a university that was shut down, the scientists would still process it at their home and release the data immediately to the public. So it's a very different mentality. But in a government organization, the employees are not allowed to do anything to overrule what the administration tells them, even if they can easily process the data.
I'm going to try to get to 2 or 3 more questions. This one says, Avi, do you think the 1977 signal could have been from 3i Atlas, as it is reported to have come from the same general direction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Again, related to one of the anomalies in my list of 12. You can check my latest essay on medium.com where I discuss all 12. So I actually encouraged the radio observers to look at 3i Atlas to check if there is any radio transmission. And today there was a report from Meerkat, the radio observatory there. And again, it's discussed in my essay today. And they put an upper limit at a particular range of frequencies, radio frequencies. They observed it on November 5th. And so the limit is just applicable to that particular date and over some range of frequencies. And during that time, they were able to set an upper limit on the power transmitted as being less than that of a cell phone. So you can say that there was no cell phone on November 5th transmitting anything from 3i Atlas.
Okay. Dr. Loeb, if 3i Atlas were to change course, or if it sent out smaller spacecraft or fragments of itself, how long would it take to arrive to Earth? Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. So if it changed course and at roughly the same speed, not making it much faster, then it would take a couple of months or so, a few months, depending on exactly the details. And in fact, that was worked out in a paper that I co-authored in the middle of July, that was published by now in a peer-reviewed journal, along with Adam Hibberd and Adam Kroll. We considered the possibility that 3i Atlas is a technological spacecraft and asked what kind of a velocity shift does it need to have in order to reach Earth at a particular date. And you can look at our plots and you will see for any target date, there is a different velocity shift that it needs to acquire at an earlier time. And so we give all kinds of scenarios for that.
How will we know that the images are authentic and not doctored?
We will never know that because we don't have access to the instruments and the flow of data, but we have to trust the NASA scientists. And science is based on trust. As you can tell these days, if you go online, you would see a lot of fake data, misinformation. You can't trust people, but there is a code of honor in science that data should never be fabricated by scientists. And there are rare examples where such fake data was produced and the scientists were punished severely for that. So I would be really surprised if that happened here. I trust scientists unless proven differently. And so I would just assume this is the data they have, especially because it's not very impressive. Now, you might say, oh, well, maybe the original data was much more impressive. I would find it really hard to imagine that they would make the images fuzzier than they actually are.
Okay, so what happens now? Is your team going to stay up all night and analyze what we just saw?
Yeah, I have some collaborators that would look into the data. I hope we will have access to that data and analyze it, see what kind of information we can get from it. But as I said at the beginning, I don't expect big news from that because the quality of the data doesn't look impressive to me. It will just be marginal to what we already know. And really, it's really the coming weeks, I think, where we will get new insights to 3i Atlas.
Avi, we always appreciate you. Thank you so much for staying on with us and taking so many of our viewers' questions from YouTube and for analyzing all that we just heard, whether it was impressive or not.
Thanks for having me. I will always tell you what I think, and with me, what you see is what you get.
All right, let's leave it there, man. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.